Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Tavern Talk. I am Ben, also known as Meta Mongoose, over on the Crickcats Discord, and with me is my usual co host Sasha. And today we're going to be talking about world building, the art of being the DM who wants to construct your very own world for your very own games and how to go about doing that. There are a lot of different ways to do that, and we're going to explore them piece by piece here this evening. Um, just so we kind of know where we are on this. I've been DMing for a very long time, and I have spent some time constructing several worlds for various games. Some people usually have like a home world that they build up and use for all of their D&D adventures throughout their tenure.
Yeah.
Um, a like that's your Ed Greenwoods who make your Forgotten Realms, and then later Wizards publishes it as their own, for their
Yeah.
purposes. Or you have other fantasy authors who build out a world so that their characters can run through it over the course of like a novel series.
hmm
um, and then there are others who kind of build a world specifically for a singular campaign, and depending on how much effort you want to put in, uh, depends mostly on how long you expect your players to be in the world. There are folk who are really big on the, you know, let's build a whole map out, and then I'm going to start my party here and they're going to explore, and maybe they'll see all the world and maybe they won't, but I made an entire world and it's cool. And then there are other people who are like, I'm going to build my world basically right where my party starts and spread out from there based on where they go. Let's see, Sasha, you're in the process of building a world, and we'll look at it here in a bit. But
Yeah.
where do you peg yourself on that world building continuum without going too
Oh.
much into the world itself?
Like how far I've completed it or
Well, like what was your starting point? Did you start small and go large, or
I
start large and kind of like zero in on where you wanted the party to play?
I think I kind of just took a plain white canvas and just threw colors on it and then kind of dimmed down what I wanted from there. So I think that's kind of how I did it. I started out big and then kind of just narrowed it down to what I really wanted. So I did the lovely technique of rolling dice.
And we'll
So,
definitely take a look at that here in just a
mhm.
little bit, because I've got that map loaded up. But anyway, so I guess we'll start maybe on the smaller end, because creating a world from scratch, like a whole world, is a very daunting task.
Mhm.
Because it's one of those decision paralysis issues where it's like, well, do I have to make continents? Do those continents have to have countries? Do those countries have to have capitals? Do those capitals have to be run by different forms of governments? How do those forms of governments work? Also,
Mhm.
there are
Yep.
monsters.
Yep.
How are the monsters dealing with it? So
Yeah.
you can
I
get
have been through
overwhelmed
all of that.
very, very quickly if you do if you don't have a vision, I guess, for the larger and then moving smaller. So I like personally to start on the other end with like a little seed, a little world seed that kind of like sprouts into a living world as the party
Yeah.
kind of envisions it. So I've got an example here of a town. This is a town map that I have in my stocks,
Mhm.
and it's a basic town that any party could start in. There's, for any particular small scale adventure, it is called Nuanar's Hold, and it has only a few named features. There is a Hunt Lord's Keep. There is the White Hart Inn, which is your inn and tavern, and it sits on the edge of the high forest along the Evermore Way. So there's only, like I said, about five named things on this entire map. But from this map, there is a lot of information here that can be used to kind of extrapolate a world based on where you want to develop and how your players kind of want to explore it. What sticks out to me here is a couple of things. The town's name, Nuanar's Hold, that means that either in the past, possibly this keep was used to hold off maybe an invasion force, or was used as some kind of defense in some kind of battle, whether that was a political issue between countries or some kind of monster attacks that this area was to be the first defense against. So that kind of sets up like a world history. There's a person named Nuanar, or something that this area is linked to historically. Maybe it is a king or a general, or maybe just a local folk hero. We are on the edge of the high forest. This could be some kind of situation where this is the forest of the high elves, or maybe this is some kind of mystical magical forest, or just they tend to give fancy names to forests that are owned by nobility.
Right.
So maybe this is just the domain of some kind of nobility. As you can see, there is a Hunt Lord's Keep, which means there is somebody who oversees this land, or did at one point.
Yeah.
If you look at the keep, you'll notice it's kind of banged up and kind of falling apart.
Right.
It's missing a chunk in its corner. The roof's kind of caved in. There's a lot of moss or something kind of growing on the roof. It doesn't look like it's been well kept. There are also some foundations in town of what either used to be buildings or are the start of new buildings. So maybe maybe this the keep was historically something but has been abandoned for some reason.
Right.
Maybe the Hunt Lord moved to a better town. He didn't want to live here anymore.
That's a possibility.
And or maybe she decided, that she wandered off into the woods and was never seen again, and now her ghost haunts the castle to this day. Or, something along those lines. But these are all like little seeds that can be used to kind of grow a world. So, Sasha, if you were to kind of theorize, what kind of country might have this on like its periphery, and what kind of dangers might be besetting it either currently or like in its past, what would come to mind for you?
So the first thing that would definitely come to mind was something in the past that kind of happened that they don't necessarily know. Like historical records are just kind of gone because it's just something that was tragic and they never could figure it out. And people kind of have just, over time, gone over it. So the past is just kind of long forgotten. That's kind of like my first instinct on it, with seeing like the different buildings missing, or like buildings that may have been there at one point. There's also the forest and also the keep, which looks like it's damaged. So again, there could be something happen, maybe a tragic battle happen there, or some kind of awful awful thing I could picture happening, because that's usually my first instinct is like, oh, ghosts. Ghosts are great. So that was kind of my first spin on it, and I would think that maybe there's something hidden in the keep that's got some lost knowledge, and somebody kind of just goes in there, like maybe a young protagonist that just kind of walks in there and finds some kind of either tome or some kind of old weapon or something that kind of has a past behind it that no one really knows about. And it kind of
So
swirls them into an adventure.
right. Well, that's the adventure seed.
Right.
So on a more macro level,
Hmm.
this is we're positing that this is maybe like a border town or like a or something on like the wild outlands of civilization, right?
My brain instantly went to start point.
Right. So what like obviously it was at one point connected to some kind of nationality that had something that would grant lordship. But are there problems maybe with another country or with like a tribal band of
Yeah. Uh,
something else?
it could be something that was just like a town wipe and then it got taken over, and it's just kind of been taken over by other people from different lands, or it could be one
So a rival
country.
country may have
Yeah.
wrecked
Mhm.
this old keep and then moved on, and
Mhm.
the other the new inhabitants just stay avoid the keep because it may be haunted
Yeah.
uh, by the previous folk.
Yeah.
Um,
That could
and,
definitely work. There could also be other stuff that could enter work with the forest. The forest could be connected to something that's unknown and something that leaks further out into like maybe it could be you could have it where it's there's some kind of connection to Feywild or some kind of connection to a different plane or something like that too.
okay, so like the forest could be a liminal space
Mhm.
where you could wander in and be part of the
Yeah, I kind of
and enter into the Feywild.
yeah, I kind of did it where like instead of like one town, I had a continent, and I kind of label like this race is here, this race is here. This is kind of how the general personality is of this said race or character type people and that kind of thing. So I could see one of those towns being either A, smack dab in the middle of nowhere, or B, possibly on the edge of a big city.
Oh, so like this is a like a former garrison,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
far from a larger city on the edge of like on the edge of a forest.
yeah. Because again, with the same type of like landscaping that's going on, especially with the broken building and stuff, it could be something that another city took over this place, and when they were done, they built what they wanted. They just kind of left it behind and gone. And I don't know, you could have people in there. You could have it completely abandoned too. You could just have it lost to history. And that's why I could place it in one of those two spots. It's actually a pretty versatile style
Oh yeah, yeah.
besides the
I like this
forest.
particular map. It's very good
Yeah.
for
You could even take out like the you could even sub over those trees and you could turn those into sand dunes if you wanted. You could really like you could
hmm
turn out all those you could turn those all into rocks. Like you could turn it into a rocky terrain instead where it was on a mountain. Like those like they're my that's just kind of the different ideas I think of when I look at those. And also where I would place it and where it would interconnect with a lot of story, because I have it where I usually have a story that's affecting the whole like world, and then I've built the world around it. I've done that too,
right.
because I've not just like I've not only like ran like my D&D game, which you have the picture of. I've written stories and I've written novels, and none of them's published or anything. It's more for fun. But I've done that stuff where it is world building and character building and a lot of storytelling and that kind of thing. So it's been it's been fun.
So yeah, so with a like I said, with a smaller kind of starting seed, what I like to do to help player this is what I like to do to help players get invested in the world. Um, I like to start on a small scale, and then as they explore the world and ask questions about the world, that kind of sets the rules of some of the world. I had a an adventuring group once who started off in a town very similar to this one, with like a small lake and like a little small adventure that happened there, and then they left and they were wandering the world, and they were always asking like, hey, do we, for a while the elf in the party was running around calling the party the King's Justice. They were like, we're going around, we're doing the King's Justice, and then finally they were like, wait, we've never actually been to a capital with a castle. Does this land even have a king? And I'm like, well, it does now, because I'd not established a particular ruling body for this area that they were in, and I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So there's now royalty here. The capital is probably from based on where you guys were earlier, probably a few weeks away. You can go there if you want, and then I'll get to bust out like the cool, you know, developed
Yeah.
city maps. And
I see how you do that. Yeah, I can I
but
see how
but
you do
if they're
it
not
too.
if the party's not interested in that, then there's no point in bringing it up or doing the work for it, unless it ties into like a greater narrative, because all it's doing is building work that the party will never see, and we do enough of that as DMs already.
Right.
uh, like as players, know that you are generally interacting with about 10% of the world that the DM has kind of
Yeah.
worked on
Yeah.
behind the scenes. And but I like giving the players like a bit of investment in their world. So
Yeah.
if they want to explore something, if they want to go somewhere, I mean the story that I'm telling can go where, wherever they end up. I'm not, married to a specific location or a specific timeline a lot of the time in my games. So, if I need a dragon to be attacking a city somewhere and the party wants to go a direction I wasn't expecting them to, that's fine. The dragon can go attack another city. Like it's not going to bother me to be like, and now we're in the desert instead of the forest. Uh, Maybe the dragon's different. Who could say? Who
Right.
cares, honestly? Like
Right.
it's the dragon attacking a city. That was my pin in the wall, and wherever we do that, we do that. But yeah, as the world develops and as the game goes on, it is interesting to kind of see how players kind of shape the world, and I also let
I
them do that with, some of their backstory stuff. Whenever I have players who want to be like, do you need a backstory from us? I'm like, well, I personally only need like the bullet points or the cliff notes version of your backstories, because I do not need a novel about your character and what they did
I've written novels about characters.
before they became adventurers, because the adventure is the part I care about.
Right.
But at the same time, keep all of that information that you have about your characters, and if you want, I fully allow players to bring it up, and if it helps develop the world, I incorporate it in, as it's being written and as it's being spoken. Just letting them talk out, they're from a town Well, what kind of town? A river town, and there were halflings who lived on barges in this river town. And I'm like, sure, that town exists. You want to go there? It's fine. We'll do a homecoming episode. It'll be great. Um, where is it? I don't know, like a week away from where we are now. It's a good travel. Always tell your players it's like a week or a month away from where they are now, and then you've got plenty of space in between all your places, and the party can wander a bit and kind of have like little mini adventures as they go. But yeah, so that's kind of how I use the small end story seeds. Have you ever had an opportunity to incorporate like stuff that your players have brought up at the table into your games,
Yes.
like to build your world out?
Actually, yeah. I've had a couple players do that. They really kind of put in their own like character backstory, and it really helped develop some of my history and past of it, because I focused on one spot that I knew the majority of the game was going to be at regardless. So I've had him shape kind of how some of the races have interacted with each other, and it's helped kind of build the social structure of the world as a whole. And it's been quite a ride, because a lot of it I try to have like a basic bullet point of this is how this is, this is how this is, this is how this is. And then 90% of the stuff that happens in game is stuff that I am thinking right on the fly, and stuff I am trying to keep up with them because they are keeping up with me a little too quickly. So I'm trying to come up with twists and turns that leave them actually wanting to discover more. And some of the stuff I didn't even have plans for, and they asked about it. They were curious about it, and they started going in and wanting to explore the world. They wanted to see more of what was out there. They wanted to see how this worked or how this thing worked, and they've gone through some of it. Um, they have noticed that because of how I have my game focused, which is very druid focused, they have been investigating a lot of nature stuff. They've been investigating a lot of stuff that's being affected that only a druid would necessarily recognize, and problems and issues that come up. So they actually are kind of understanding it, and they're learning from it. Because they're learning from it, they're starting to look for certain things that they hadn't looked for before. And it's helped me kind of shape where they're going. And I like how pretty much how you have like run games, as you had said, you let us slowly discover it. So it's kind of like you have this blank map, and we start here, and as we slowly move out, like it gets uncovered, and then you can investigate further. So yeah, it's kind of helped me lead into that. He really helped me with that, especially with social structure, because of his character, and he threw his backstory. And I told my players when I made it, they mostly joined because it's my first campaign, and they really wanted me to run a game. I was like, okay, I guess I'll try it. And I told them to make characters. I didn't tell them I don't want builds. I don't want like strong mechanical functions of D&D. I don't want these meta characters. I want characters to help build this world, and they're delivering.
Okay.
So
Well, speaking of, we have a map here of your world.
yeah,
So let's take a look at it here.
I think it's got some pencil on there
Yeah,
from
it's fine.
some of it's been from where my players have gone and where they're going.
But so how? I guess is this? I assume this is a world that you started like macro picture and worked your way in.
Yeah, I actually started on a huge graph map, And I was like, all right, this is great. And I was like, that is too big. I need to have it condensed down. And then I actually kind of copied it from what I had because I did that whole thing on a giant graph laminated graph paper and copied it from that to there. And there's some that I've added my own taste into. And I used some
My cat tried to
colored.
get my string.
That cat is so cute.
Anyway, so you built this map ahead of time. Uh, what was your process here?
My first process was taking a big, like, I guess like what you'd use for combats, like the big graph maps that are like
Mm-hmm.
the
The
big tiled graph or whatever. I can't
yeah,
remember what it's called. The graph paper.
those battle mats.
The battle mats. I took that and I used a handful of dice and I rolled them out on there. And then I drew around them for the continents. And I also took, once I got this kind of basic outline, I actually started refining it. And when I did that, I'd realized it was on a huge map and I have a much smaller thing that I need to translate it to. So I translated it to. I actually have a name on it. I just didn't put it on that map because it's in my Discord and stuff for players. But the next thing was actually like those mountain ranges. Um, some of them I actually put on there where I rolled. Like I rolled D4s for mountains and like D12s for lakes. And that's kind of partially where they landed. And I kind of modified it a little bit to kind of fit it a little better. And some of them don't have mountain ranges at all. They look incomplete, but they are because they're not meant to have much vegetation or mountainous regions. So yeah, it was a fun process. I also have it where I then drew the rivers to match where I wanted the rivers to go, how big the rivers would be. The and there's actually I think a purple outline on a couple of those places. It's a little small for me right now.
Yeah,
um, but there's purple outlines on one of those big lakes. It is a huge lake. I think on there and the one up north on
looks
the
like
big
the
continent.
two on the larger continent have
Yeah,
like little purple
yeah.
outlines on them.
Those actually specify that they are very heavy and rich in like arcane magic. I
The
actually have
enchanted
it.
waters.
Yeah, pretty much. So like, yeah, the one that's the most southern is actually a lake that is very fey heavy. Like it's a very fey heavy region, and then the one that's up north, I haven't necessarily decided, but my players haven't gone up there. So I haven't planned for that yet. They've actually been actually working their way down south to the dwarves because there's a story where they have to find somebody down. I actually have their little initials next to the red dots. The red dots are big cities. I haven't named one of them because, again, players haven't really gone yet. So one of them probably has, but I have not gotten that far because they've mostly focused. And there's a couple of times where I messed up on where that city was.
So you've kind of developed a world map, but aren't developing like a societal structure to it until the party runs across it.
Yeah, I do have basic stuff with races, and a lot of these big cities are actually race specific. Like the one that's down south in that mountain range, that is a very heavy dwarven area. The one that's got CV is actually the elven city, like the one elven city, because elves do not like to. In my world, elves are very much, we do not like dealing
They're
with anybody
isolationist.
else. They are very much isolationist, and um, yes, I made them xenophobic because I kind of liked how it was because I had other story that also fit. and came from that. So it caused actually that the elves and the other races, the elves and the dwarves, I had it where because of this character, there was a war outbreak between them, and his backstory involved like another, not another character, but like an NPC that was his going to be wife, who was an elf and he was a gnome. So they kind of that kind of made it cohesive, and I was like, oh, there's something I can do. So yeah, there's also on the far was it far west? Yeah, far west is like a very heavy coastal theme. So it's got a lot of water type creatures, coastal type seafaring people, a lot of pirate feel too. So I have a lot of that developed because a lot of the other stuff they're not necessarily going to go to. They'll only go to those if they get there. So it's kind of like a blanket mapped over there. If they actually get to that spot, then we'll go through it. But for now they're not
They're
really doing it. The
mostly
story,
continent bound.
yeah, the story is requiring them to go there. The players haven't really tried to ask or tried to really go out of the continent, but there is also a giant turtle that they can keep track of on a special map that I gave them. So,
The,
be-
is it a giant water turtle or just a giant turtle that wanders the
so
land?
it is a giant turtle that wanders the land. However, for that gigantic mass, that is actually the druid stronghold. Giant
So there's
turtle.
a city on the back of a
There is a
turtle.
literal city on the back of a turtle. It is an entire druid city. However, how I have it, whenever the turtle travels, the turtle actually goes to a different plane to travel. Because I have the
Oh,
story
so it, like
where the
walks through the astral or something,
yes,
or the
the
ethereal
arch
plane.
the arch druid, who is ahead of the druids and everything, and actually found this little itty bitty turtle in the astral sea and raised it until it became this massive turtle from
Why,
the astral
man, this
sea.
this sounds very familiar.
And made it where it was the druid stronghold. So like I actually gave my players where if they decided to make a druid that they got little benefits because they came from there. So their mission was be sent by the arch druid to investigate the problem that's happening in the world and yada yada yada. That was their plot hook. To leave the Druid Isles is what it's called, the Wandering Druid Isles, which is a lot of fun.
Hmm.
And people are like, well, how have like people not found it? How come druids can only find it? I was like, because it travels to a different plane whenever it moves, so it pops around here and there, and it goes all around the world. And the fact that it does absolutely swim, it can pop up in the middle of water, but it doesn't affect the druid city whatsoever. So,
Hmm.
because again, I had a druid set this up, so they made it where it's not going to be a problem.
Well, I found a picture of somebody using this dice map making method that you used. So
Yeah.
here's kind of what it kind of looks like in action. And you take a bunch of dice and you spill them all over your map, and then you take your marker and you just kind of make your
Draw around it.
draw
Yep.
around them. And then some of them, you can choose if you want to be like, the d20s mean this, or the numbers. This guy did number ranges, so 1 to 2 on a d4, 1 to 3 on a d6, one to all these meant fields and plains. Then the next one up was like all of them are forests, then mountains. So whatever the numbers were, whatever the predominant numbers were in the area were what that was.
I never thought about that one, but that's actually a good one too.
So that way you can use multiple kinds of dice and you don't have like one mountain in the middle of nowhere because there was only one d4 in the middle of a bunch of d6 or whatever. You could just be like, what is the prevailing number cycle system of this region, this region is more dominated by mountains. This region is more dominated by forests.
Right.
That's how he did this one. It looks like, and then the D20 gets you your capitals and your castles. If it rolls high enough, and that way you can kind of figure out where your capitals on any given
Yeah.
uh,
I just kind of
continent are.
planted them. So yeah, I never thought about doing it like that too, because that's probably a lot smarter than me just
Well, it
looking and going,
depends.
oh, I'm gonna put a
It's more
city here.
random that way, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you know, people don't build their capitals randomly.
No, my
if you think
capitals
about
are
it,
built up.
well, I mean, if you think about it like on a societal system, a capital is built because it is the most valuable city in the region. The city is valuable for a reason. If that reason is, it was originally a rich mining town near some mountains, it is well defensible. It got a lot of trade. That trade made the area wealthy. Or maybe it's a coastal town and has a lot of trade coming. Anywhere where you could be a nexus of trade is usually where larger cities tend to crop up. And the larger your city is and the more defended it is, the more likely it's going to be a capital of somewhere.
Yeah, I actually have a city that I fully had designed that my players were going into. I even had a school completely made out that was close to a big city. It is a giant school that is meant for it's a bard school. So,
Hmm.
and I actually made this giant city that actually has an entirely different social structure, has an entire different like um, capitalistic type society. It has a lot of different odds and ends, and I got some inspiration from I want to say Avatar, The Last
Oh, yeah.
Airbender. I got an inspiration for bossing Say,
Okay.
where it was like one ring, two rings, three rings, and in the middle are the richest people, and then it stretches out to the middle class, and then it stretches out to
Like the lower classes, the
the
further out
lower
you go.
class. So there is a class like system depending on how much money you have, and the players end up being on like the technical middle class, but for like where they are. But there's also a giant school that I made that is a Bard College school where students go there and they learn all the different colleges, and they actually inspired by Harry Potter that instead of like having a hat tell you where you go, I have it where they have to like stream a lute, so they have to like pluck the strings on a lute, and whatever chord it is actually the college that they're going to go to.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I really thought all this stuff out. This is actually the type of world building stuff that I thought of because my players were when I knew what direction they were going, I was like, all right, cool. I've got this all set up. I know exactly what I'm going to do, exactly where I'm going to go. It's the same thing with the very particular forest, which you saw was kind of like smack dab in the middle of the continent. That was actually a glade that it was a very large glade forest area, and that was actually where you helped me with that combat that I had with my players. And that one was again, I actually had a lot in there, but my players kind of ran out of time. They didn't exactly know they had a time frame for it, but they had run out of time. But it also helped that they started late because they didn't know what was happening and they're slowly unraveling the story. But it helped me as soon as I know what direction they're going, it helped me build stuff out. They actually left that giant city to head south to where they needed to go, and they went by boat. They went down the rivers, and they actually were like, "Oh, well, they should be doing transportation all the time." I'm like, "Actually, this city only does like freight transport. So like all it does is like food, supplies, whatever goes on big boats meant to go down the river just to take it to the trade
This
point."
is this is a commerce way, not a
Mm-hmm.
Not a pleasure
They
cruise.
don't. Yeah, they don't have it, but they were like, man, we really need to go there, and we don't want to go by foot, and they found a smuggler. So, because obviously, with most commerce, you're gonna have a smuggler.
Well, somewhere, I'm sure. Like that's just how this works, right?
But yeah, exactly. And so they help with that, but it also helped me bring down to um, the actual stop by point. Gave them some more stuff on that because again, it's a place that's really close to that forest, and they have a lot of problems with it because since the bad stuff happened, a lot of bad stuff's been coming out of the forest, and a lot of bad stuff because of kind of how this stuff's happening in the story is causing them to be affected, and they've ran into things they had never seen before, but they haven't tried to go back into the forest to look at it further. So,
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting little bit of added world building. I like that
yeah,
there's a commerce path. Uh,
yes, that they do not. They actually have tours of the city. It's a lot of fun. I really went into this stuff too because they're actually on a cliff face, and where their river like ends, it actually goes towards a waterfall. So they actually use the waterfall. It's similar to like Niagara Falls. Like you go over there and you pay to like look at the water.
hmm.
And so it's kind of like a sightseeing thing. So people will go there just to look at it, but you have to have enough money and you have to have like at least a high enough class in order to see it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it
Um,
was a lot of fun doing that one. Like I said, I absolutely prepared a lot of stuff. I prepared a lot of different things. I even included for especially for that, I actually have a transportation that goes to the school and back. So like essentially you can ride the school bus to get to
oh.
school. Instead of walking the like day's journey, you could literally just like get the wagon and cuts it to like 2-3 hours instead of all day.
Nice.
And I even have a whole entire teacher structure. I have students. I have a bunch of different secrets of that school, which again, they haven't
Um,
fully
so
discovered
out
that
of
school.
curiosity, how much of that do you ever expect your players to interact with?
None.
Oh, okay. I mean, this this is a common
None.
problem for us, but yes.
I get in
Um,
so much detail about the things I want them to explore, and they just completely yeet it out the window and go, I want to go look at that thing. And I'm like,
those
I don't have
those of
anything
you
for
those
that
of you
thing.
players at home, explore more things, please. We put a lot of work into them.
I had it my last game session. One of my characters was like, may have joined a a we're gonna I don't religion based off of a psychedelic toad
So,
that gives you visions.
yep.
And he got a whole bunch of stuff because he is like heavily focused on that. He's like, all right, I'm gonna find this. I'm like, okay. He was looking, he looked for goblins because, of course, goblins. You know the characters I make, so you know very well I
You
have
you are
goblins.
you are a fan of both drugs and goblins at the same time.
So he ran into 3 goblins in a trench coat. And then he was like, yes, well, what about this? Or what about something like that? What about something like stronger? And yeah, he ended up getting some very wild story stuff that's all conflicted and confusing and everything, which was the whole premise behind that. Because I'm like, I'm just going to punish your player because I did not prepare for you to find 3 goblins in a trench coat
Hmm.
to look for the not hypnotoad.
Yep.
You have to pay because he goes there and the goblins make you pay to see the toad. So you have to pay to see the toad. Go to the toad, and you, well, like
Yep.
most poisonous, venomous, poisonous is poisonous.
Yeah, poisonous.
Most poisonous tree frogs, you have to lick them.
Yep.
And that's what he did, and he got super
Visions.
super hallucinating visions. And so, yeah, and then he was incapacitated for the rest of the day, all throughout the entire night into the next day, and the goblins decided to take more of his money while he was unconscious.
Hmm.
So, as like a please stop doing this.
So, to review, players, we prep a lot of things as DMs, and trust me, if you think you've interacted with everything, you're wrong by leaps and bounds, a lot of the time. But
There's so
as
much I
a
prepare for.
speaking of prepping, though, while doing prep for this, I remembered that I had come across a person wanting some world building help on D&D Beyond a week or so ago when I was kind of trying to figure out what we were going to do for this particular tavern talk. And the world that they posited was had a very interesting bend to it that I really it made me stop and actually think about how a world like this would develop. So I'm gonna share that with you, and I'm gonna kind of talk you through kind of how I went about helping them and see maybe what you have as well.
Yeah.
So this was the post. It was, they have a gem moon based system in their world. There are 6 gem moons that are in, each one is in the sky for 7 years at a time. So instead of all of them in 1 year, or each of them one per year for like an amount of time, it's each moon has its time for 7 years, and then it moves on to the next and on to the next. And they're going to be doing like little mini campaigns during each of those 7 year bits, and they would like the moons to have some kind of an effect on the players, but also an effect on the world. And they might be linked to some gods. He's got 6 major gods in the world, but and each one might have some kind of element in inspiration. But he wanted some help on kind of how to structure it and kind of what society would look like based on this kind of theory that he has posited. So here's kind of, after thinking it over for a little while, here's kind of what I passed on. Now, I kind of gave an idea of what the moon kind of does, some ideas of what player effects. Now, not all of the effects are listed are things that you should do all at once. Maybe just pick one, or maybe none of them, and just something akin to these ideas. But the world effect is kind of where I put most of my effort into kind of deciding what a world would be like based on if there was a cycle of moons that controlled an aspect of the world for a period of time. That's kind of what I dug into on that. So step 1, we have a ruby moon. The light of the ruby moon casts a red glow amongst the populace, raising passions and driving monsters to action. So this is kind of like a breathing dangerous life into the world. Everyone is kind of on edge. There are increased monster incursions. This is the beginning of 7 years of societal strife between nations. Tempers are more likely to flare between like leaders, which leads to wars. There are great love stories as passions rise. This is, whenever you have your bards telling great ballads of crazy love stories, this is the kind of age that they would come from. And wild adventures amongst the adventuring parties are had as everything just feels more alive. So this is like the base start of this cycle, and I just decided that this would be a good starting point to kind of get the blood flowing, get the energy of the game up and moving, kind of get the world engine started, kind of prime it a little bit. From there, We move to the Amber Moon after 7 years of high passions and violence. The light of the Amber Moon cools the passionate fires of the previous 7 years. Peace begins to bloom, and the cycle of diplomacy and healing begins. So you have your 7 years of war and crazy passions, and then finally the fever breaks, and now all of a sudden the diplomats start moving around, peace talks begin, the world kind of begins to heal from this violent uprising of almost a decade that it's been through, right? So player effects again, not as important, but we bonus some healing skills, persuasion skills, animal handling, you know maybe do something bonus to non-violent actions. That again mostly irrelevant. But on the world building side, monster incursions decrease as the monsters kind of like stop being supercharged. Society settles down. But you still need stuff for your adventuring party to do, right? So the adventurers go out to go find, lost treasures that have been, buried during the wars. There are a lot of ruins, a lot of castle ruins, a lot of ancient lost areas that have been devastated by war, and now you've got people picking through the wreckage. So this is something for your adventurers to go do during these 7 years. From here, we then get to the Topaz Moon. The Topaz Moon is kind of brings kind of like a hunger for industry. As this last 7 years of peace have kind of like made trade possible. Now there aren't, merchants can go places. They're not worried about their caravans being attacked so often, or their world devastated by checkpoints and wars and who knows what else. So trade explodes. Lots of magic items and rich exotic goods are becoming more prevalent for a while. A bunch of fresh mines are unearthed, and of course you need something for the adventurers to do. And there's probably some hibernating monsters down there that have dug themselves underground to rest for the next age or whatever.
All I can say is lunacy. That's what they said.
So you gotta give your adventurers stuff to do during this time. So this is 7 years of digging, going through mines and having underground adventures. You could even do some Underdark stuff. You could deal with a lot of mining incidents, or a lot of trade town. Trade's exploding, right? So maybe piracy is on the rise in some places because if there's a lot of goods, there's also probably some pirates or some raiders.
I was gonna say bandits would probably be
bandits,
big too. Highwaymen.
These are all on the rise. So then we get to the Emerald Moon. So the greenish hue of the Emerald Moon ushers in the winds of change. Children born during this. Now this is where I started to get really into planning for the next. Like most of these kind of like followed one after another, but when I got to here, I had to think about kind of, because we're coming up on the beginning of the cycle again in a few years, right? So the children that are born now have to basically be prepared for like the 7 years of now, or however many years they are when they're born during this age, plus the next 7 years, which are not going to be great, and the next 7 years, which are back to monsters and wars and stuff, right? So if your societies that have gone through this cycle multiple times,
yeah, and they prepare for the next cycle.
Right. Like this is the children born during this 7 year cycle have to begin being the main preparation team because they're the ones that are going to be coming of age during this age of strife that's coming up. So they're going to live through what's about to come, and they're going to come of age during the war cycle. So you've got, prophecy running rampant. There are schools and secret enclaves popping up, acquiring children to mold into pawns for the coming age of strife. Kidnapping and raiding for children, is on a rise, and adventurers are often called to go rescue these kidnapped children. You have to have something for the adventurers to do,
Yeah, we
and
also had it's like children wake up 8 years from now, or children 8 years from now. What happened?
but
And
you've
all I
got
just think of is Scar.
right, but it's like you've got like all these secret societies that are just snapping up kids left and right, and countries that are opening, if they haven't already, like academies that are churning through these children
Right.
to get them ready because they know what's coming, and they have to have the kids be ready for that, or else the country or whatever the society wants to be positioned well just isn't going to make it into the next age.
That's why I thought of Scar's song "Be Prepared." That's
Yeah.
just what I thought.
So from there, we then move to the back end of this, right? So you've got the sapphire moon. So under the blue sheen of the sapphire moon, the world awaits for the prophesized end times. Preparations are made. Power struggles arise between leaders hoping to avert impending disaster. Countries struggle to reforge old survival plans or attempt new methods, because obviously, if this has happened over and over again, you're going to have some countries that are like, look, this is the cycle. This is how we prepare for the cycle. This is how we've always prepared for the cycle. It's seen us through. And then you're going to have other countries where you've got people being all like, why don't we try something different? Like,
Right.
maybe the way we've been doing it these last like few cycles isn't the best plan. Here's some new ideas. Or everyone's kind of clamming up, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And we're coming up on the end times of this cycle, the end of the cycle. So you've got all these, while society is kind of closing in and people are becoming more isolationist in preparation for the times to come, and countries are closing their borders, hardening their defenses, stuff like that. You got to have something for your adventurers to do. So they're going to
Yeah.
be going around, popping, a bunch of new little cults are going to be popping up left and right.
You'll
Um,
have
you're going to have weirdos off in the smaller towns,
hermits.
hermits, being all like, I've figured out my great wisdom and how I'm going to survive the cycle, and you guys should do
Yeah.
it too. How are we going to do
And
it?
you have
We're going to
people who
worship a demon. That's how we're going to do it. And then you need adventurers to go solve for that, or else you got demons everywhere. It's a pain.
then you got people who don't even understand there's a cycle going on. So
Well, I would imagine that in this world, much like akin to like the Game of Thrones world, where their cycles are not strict, but there's a long winter and then a long spring, and those go on for years at a time. So there's always going to be people old enough to know the cycle exists, and they're always going to be looking at the younger people and being like, the cycle exists. This 80-year-old guy has been through this cycle twice now, or this old grandmother has been through this cycle enough to know, or these elves that are longer lived, that are 300 or 400 years old, are very familiar with how this cycle works. Or so you can't, they're not people who may not know, because there'd have to be a demarcation every time the moon changes. There's probably
yeah,
like a festival or something,
maybe
or
yeah.
something.
Kind of like how we have seasonal
Yeah.
festivals. There could be
yeah,
festivals that
lunar
happen
lunar
every 7
festivals of
years.
some kind.
Yeah, yeah.
That would,
And it can involve different actions depending on
yeah,
what it
depending on the
is.
moon, and you just
Like,
you
oh
just
no,
find out.
Ruby's coming
There's a
up.
book at your local D&D party city somewhere that explains how you're supposed to do the ritual of the blue moon or the ritual of the red moon, or
The
whatever.
ritual of the red moon is just boarding up your doors and putting lamb's blood on the outside of the
Hope the
door.
wolves don't come for you.
Like, yeah.
Um, all right, so that's the sapphire moon. Like everyone's locking down, everyone's becoming more isolationist. There are a bunch of little cults popping up. The adventurers have to go deal with that, right? So then we get to the amethyst moon, which is the end of the cycle. So in this one, we've made it to the end times of sorts, and I did specifically make it so that the amethyst moon is the end time moon, and then the ruby moon follows it into the strife and passions rise. So you basically get 14 years of bad times all at once, so
So
that
like
society can deal with that and then spend the rest of the like several years recovering from like 14 years of terrible. uh
so so if they were, let's say somebody was like born on like the day of a new moon phase,
yes.
like would their birthday be reoccurring every year? Would their birthday be like a leap year where it's every 7 years?
No, it would be the same birthday. It would just, like, I'm guessing, like, if you ever make it back to your 7 year cycle, it means something special.
Yeah.
Like
That
that
could be
like
that could be
that
something,
birthday
yeah.
is a more special birthday, but it's the same day every year. It's just every 7 years it's a different moon, and every 42 years, yeah, every 6 7 years, 6 moons, every 42 years or whatever, there's more. There's It's just cooler. On your
10
42nd
times
on your
cooler. It's a
42nd
lot.
birthday, something cool happens, and on your 84th birthday, something really cool happens. And
It's a
most
lot
people
cooler
most
that they
people
did.
don't make it to their like 106th birthday, or whatever.
Yeah, but even then, it
Uh,
also just depends on how long people live for,
right.
anyways.
But anyway, so the amethyst moon. So the purplish haze ushers in the age of darkness and strife. Evil awakens, the world shudders. So darkness reigns, shadows are the vanguard of terror during this age. Citizens huddle behind walled cities, soldiers guard them. In the outlands, small towns call on adventurers to help protect them from the nightly specters. Heroes begin to bloom during these years, cutting their teeth on the shadows as we turn to a more violent age. Because right now, you're just dealing with like spooky things. This is the spooky things age. Your undead, your demons, your whatever, and all the
The demons that people paid patrons to before several
and you have
several
to
ones ago.
and remember, before all the people that were born during the emerald moon are now in their like 18s and 20s, right? So this is the time where they become like great adventurers,
Yeah,
and then
they start becoming skilled
right,
and more and stronger than they were before.
right, but then that of course leads us back to uh, the ruby moon. So now they're in their like 20s and 30s, and now we're dealing with war for 7 years, or like increased passion, whatever. Like they're adventurers, and now they get to go have their war fun, or their dalliances or whatever, and great tales are told. And then once they get those 14 years of problems out of their system, we move back into the responsible ages of putting the world back together.
At least it's kind of every 7 years. So there's actually the possibility of rebuilding.
Right. Like it's a set, like the way I envisioned, or at least the way they set it up, and the way I kind of ran with it. It was it was a cyclical thing that didn't that kind of exuded power on the world that was noticeable, but not like overtly like backbreaking to society. Like society can withstand wars. Society can withstand uh, dark terrors for 7 years if they know that eventually that will abate and the next thing will happen, and then once the wars are over and people calm down, things will be rebuilt and trade will resume, and the ages of plenty are coming.
They
You
just
have to
have
give
to wait
you
it
have to give
out.
people hope, um, or else things just kind of or society just falls apart, and you can't have a world if you don't have a functioning society to live
Yeah,
in
that
it,
is true.
right?
That is true.
So with that kind of in mind, uh, with kind of what they posited, how would you go about constructing a world just on that idea? Like, how would you go about that?
My brain goes everywhere. Because my brain goes into story, and I'm trying to focus on the world build part. But there's I like the different aspects that you have with it, where it affects like the characters and players as a whole. I like how you incorporated that a lot. I also I think kind of the different parts that I would go to is, oh gosh, my brain goes everywhere here. I'm sorry. I gotta focus on it. I gotta wrangle one of them in, just like lasso that idea and pull it in. There are so many different ideas that I have with that one, and it is very much that each moon affects where they are differently, and it could be any number of things. I mean, you could put gods into that, and your gods kind of like structure it how it functions, because the gods may be aligned with those moons, and it could have it where they are affecting it in some way, and the players have to kind of figure that out. Then, oh, there's also different behaviors and patterns, like as it is. You have it all out pretty well, so there's not a lot for me to really change so much, because I like the ideas that you've got there. But I would probably add in some more. I don't know, probably some more world affecting. Not just really like really going after kind of like player and like player mechanics. There would be like along with the amethyst moon being the darkest times, it'd probably be one of the colder times. Or there's possibly another one where like maybe magic does not work as well during that time period, so magic is kind of like dimmed down, so people kind of have to survive more on what their knowledge of survival is, rather than using magic as a crutch. So there could be that kind of thing depending on what moon it is. So yeah, I think what you have is pretty patent down. So I kind of like have different ideas, but my brain goes more to
Well,
story
my
ideas rather
so when I
than
when I posited
world.
this to my wife, she came up with the idea. She wanted to tie the moons more closely to the gods, as was suggested in the original post, and then if the gods were tied to a specific, like if it was a more magical setting, depending on how the gods were involved in specific schools of magic during that time, that school of magic might be a little more in ascendance than others, and the and maybe some world effects that kind of correlate to that school of magic would be more on the table. I wanted to keep
Yeah,
it more broad so that non-magical individuals would also feel like
right.
the world, that affects them as
Yeah,
well. I don't
I
I
I
don't
would
want to tie it to just well, it's a
Yeah.
weird moon for the next 7 years. The wizard's
Yeah.
different now for a while.
Yeah. But I also would like it where, say, for like the red, people that are like barbarians, they
Right.
just kind of have like an amped up
Like
like
an amped rage.
strength, like yeah, like a pumped up rage, like they just have more of an adrenaline fueled one, and just like there's just something where it causes them to either have a rage that lasts longer or have a rage that's stronger or even have another rage. So like there's something that I thought of where like I could relate each ones to certain classes and it affects them
Hmm.
high or low. Like Amethyst, it had it where it was like what +2 or something to stealth checks.
Oh
So
yeah, like
like,
I said, the stat part I added in was mostly just because they wanted
hmm,
some ideas of how the moon could affect
yeah,
players on like a more
yeah,
individual level. But
yeah,
I mean, those
individual
are.
wise, yeah,
I was just like I was personally more interested in like how the moon would influence a society based on that
yeah,
structure,
yeah,
and then what adventurers would more commonly be stuck doing during those times. Not so much like, yes, the world is a little more on edge during the red moon because everyone's passions are higher, but also like a lot more monster attacks.
actually the
Players are going to
most
be out
baby
there
booming
fighting
one.
monsters more, or getting swept up in a
uh
war, or
to
whatever.
be honest, Ruby sounds like it is the one that causes the population to increase.
I mean, it. I would imagine it's a wash with all the wars, but you never know.
You never
Um,
know, like everyone's like fashion goes up higher, so like and it also depends, like, do these moons are is there like an actual order to the moons, or are they just kind of random
See,
depending
I set mine as
on
an
what
order.
happens? Yeah,
I didn't
because
want
I
them
think
to
I
be
would prefer
random
an
because I would,
order.
though I could see like a coming. It'd be harder to plan for, like on a societal level. But I could imagine some kind of lunar ritual or celebration every 7 years to usher in whatever moon may come, and then whatever color it is, like you've got a bunch of like astronomery sages who are like sitting around a table talking to the king, being like, "Oh, it's the sapphire moon. This is what we know will happen during the
Mhm.
sapphire moon times. We got to rewrite like the next 7 years of urban planning." you
That would
know,
be the same thing with like a kingdom has it where they have it where they're like, "Sir, you know that this moon is coming up. You know that we are kind of at a cold standing war with said kingdom over
right,
there. So you know something's going to happen. We have to prepare for
right.
it."
Well,
So
that's why I
like,
set like a whole moon for preparation.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, society has decided that they know where this is going, and
I
we're good now. We hope.
I could see, like, the way that I would see gods kind of be thrown into it would be more like a god represents this moon, or like a god like, oh, this god is either looks like this one, or looks like they're affiliated with it, or looks like they're somehow a part of that moon. Not
hmm
necessarily with like the behavioral stuff, which you could throw in. That
Well,
is
it'd be
if you
like
wanted to
the
put in
moon
the
is
god
maybe
stuff.
got like a deific palace on it, and it's their seat of
Mm-hmm.
power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
but not
like,
necessarily affecting people as a whole, like the society as a whole.
yeah, I don't know. But again, like just dealing with gods that well, I mean, you can probably make it fit a little bit to. It seemed like if I leaned heavier into the gods, it would favor dealing with the divine classes more than I. And
Yeah, no,
if I
I see
leaned
that.
more into like the magic side, it would favor the magic classes. I didn't really want to favor any particular class.
Right.
I wanted the idea to kind of encompass the whole world,
Yeah.
however that goes. So that was kind of my take on this kind of idea that spoke to me. That was like, hey, moons are cool, and these are all made of gems that are interesting, and they all have real weird world effects. How does society exist in a world that has a cyclical system that is actually long enough that you know society can notice the effects? Because if it was only like for a month or for a year or whatever, like the effects aren't really long enough to be noticeable in any real way.
Right.
Um, or they would just be like an annoyance. Like during if it was only like a month or a year or something, you'd have like diplomats coming to blows for a year, but then like smarter heads sitting around being like, I understand we're all angry and on edge, but it's only going to be for a year. If you guys could just, I don't know, punch it out in a room for a year instead of sending us to war, that'd be great, because after this year's up, you'll realize how dumb that was.
So I can also see like a societal structure where people who are at their kind of like their strongest points during particular moon phases all kind of come together as like ambassadors to try and come up with some kind of peace. So I kind of also see that.
So yeah, so
But I could
I
see
did
that too.
I did try to one of the moons, the one where like people were planning for the Age of Strife and like other people had like iconoclastic ideas where instead of following the cycle, you would have groups of people who are like, this cycle thing's dumb, and we know what's coming. Why don't we just resolve to not be dicks when we get to the red moon? Can we all just resolve to be friends?
So I could picture
and then
a
that
society.
just not working out.
Yeah, because I could see like how you'd said like cults and stuff. I literally could see there are societies that worship that particular moon.
Oh yeah, like little
And
pop-up cults
yeah,
just
like pop-up cults that like they just worship that moon, and then like you just have a whole society where they all worship those different moons and they
yeah.
talk about them, and it's like astrological discussions. And
It's like some
it's just kind
cults
of
that are
like
trying to get on
it's like
the
it's
tail
like a
end of
group
like the
it's like
Hale-Bopp
a group
comet or whatever.
yes
You know?
it's like a group of sages you throw together that are all like, well, my moon does this, well, my moon does this, and then like they try to come with some resolution to figure out more stuff. I could see that happening too, with having all of the moons combined, where you can have those kinds of people that there are melded together and trying to come up with diplomatic solutions
A
for
society
these
of
problems.
lunatics.
Exactly. Oh my goodness, it's it's great, but I could see that, and then people would call them
A
the
society of
lunatics
lunatics.
instead of heretics.
Yeah. Bunch,
Society of
bunch of
lunatics.
lunatics.
I can see it, and that's how they're portrayed as, and like
Yeah.
people
It's
just
like they
don't
just want to
believe
get
them.
along, and that's not how this works.
Yeah, and
That's
like
how
people
it's
just
never
think,
worked this way.
they just think they're crazy, and they're full of like people that are like the hermits and
Bunch
the
of
people that
hippies.
like hide away. Yes. I could see that happening, and I could see players interacting with that. It's kind of similar to like having a whole underground-esque society that just wants everyone to get along and is tired of all of
Right.
the
They
cycles
want to
and
break the
the
cycle.
wars. Yeah, and instead working with what they have rather than just letting kind of the world go to chaos and you kind of just pick up as you go. So I could see that.
But anyway, so yeah, that's like I said, kind of an interesting idea that I had come across, and kind of tried to have like a little thought experiment of kind of how a world like that would be able to stabilize, rather than fall apart. If you've only got, you can't really build a society if it falls apart every 7 years. You have to have some healing time in there and people to like
Right.
live long enough to understand that there is a cycle, and to society, we like to plan for things. So But anyway, so assuming you don't have kind of like an overarching vision, like this person clearly did, of how they want, how they kind of wanted the base of the world to exist, but also uh, weren't quite sure of the particulars, but kind of had an overarching vision. Or in your case, you kind of like rolled some dice out on a mat and said, we're gonna start making continents and go from there. Or like I said, some of my more helpful plans is to kind of start on the small scale. Another way that might be helpful, especially for those who have a hard time grasping like a visual concept of their world and kind of trying to figure out like they just don't haven't quite sorted how they want their world puzzle piece to fit together. A suggestion of mine that I recommend is just start looking through fantasy art online. So what you do is you just Google, like fantasy world art and hit search. And what you get is fun art kind of like this, where you've got what looks to be an ancient city. It's overgrown by trees, and now you have to, you just pin that up on the board and be like, all right, I've decided that this is part of my world somehow. And you just pin it on the wall, and then from there, you go through the Google line again, and you find another one of like a floating city bit on like on a river with a crazy magic spire in the middle, and that doesn't make much sense to you, but you're like, hey, guess what? We're gonna pin it on the wall too, and it's gonna be part of my world somehow. We haven't quite figured it out yet. And then you go and you find another creepy looking place and you pin it on the wall, right? And you're like, hey, this is part of my D&D dream board. And then you start figuring out where all of these things are in a world, give them names, and kind of build out from those little pinpoints of light or darkness, I guess in this case, or
Yeah.
whatever, in your world. You don't have to build out the whole world. Just pin out a handful of places, and then like ripples in a pond, just kind of build out their surroundings until the surroundings touch. And then if you do that enough, you end up with a world. And you can, go through and go, add in, well, this looks like it had been destroyed, like that first one that we had up there. It looks like it was a city that is now overgrown by trees. Um, why? What happened to it? Did it lose a fight with a druid? did did a druid enclave heck up this town? Or is this a ruin of a long lost
Yeah.
society that the forests have overtaken? And if it was
Yeah,
long
that was
lost,
something I
why
thought
is
of for
it
that.
long lost? What happened to make
What
it
secrets does it
go
have?
away?
Yeah.
Same with this city on the waterfall. It it's got some kind of crazy magical spire in the middle of it. What is that thing? Why is that thing? Is it important on a political or sociological level to how the world does all of its, like, do people come here to learn? Is this a wizard thing? Do people come here to do magic or learn magic? Or is it some source of power that this nation uses to exert a power over its rivals, or is it a thing that mystically generates peace? You know?
Yeah. I also see with like it looks like at one point that either the whole like I don't want to say cliff face, but that looked like it used to be a mountain that just got
Like cut in half.
somehow
Like
cut in half, and all that's left is a spire.
right. Like did a titan carve this out during some great war a long time ago?
Right. That's
Um,
like that. That's one of the first things I think of. Is that, and there's also the what looks like hot air
yeah, I like
balloons.
the hot air balloons.
So
Well, I would imagine that's an easy way to get from one side of the city to the other,
yeah, that is true.
since it is cleaved in half.
Yes, and
I
you
would
can see
imagine.
the waterfall like in between it. So then it makes you wonder like how far down does it go? Does it spread out into the ocean? Does it spread out into like a body of water? Like where does that water go? Does it go past the spires? Does it just keep going down? Like there's so many more kind
Well,
of like
so what
questions.
immediately came to mind from this when I saw it and was thinking about it was, so imagine a long time ago if this was just a chunk of mountain with like a river running through and a small village that had kind of spread along the base of the mountain on both sides, right?
Right.
Even in the middle, that's not there anymore. Like there used to be village there, like little hill village, and then along came some kind of ecological disaster or geological destructive event or some titan that, like you said, cleaved through the mountain for some reason, and all that you had left were like two hunks of village with still survivors in them,
Right.
uh, and they still were friends, they still knew each other, and they just kind of did their best to fix things up, but they also wanted to like get across to help each other. So someone invented those little hot air balloons to get across so they could help each other and like ferry each other with supplies across the divide. And then eventually, like a wizard showed up and built this weird tower in the middle, and the trade and this became kind of, because the wizard or the magic bit was here or was located here, this became a site of political importance. So the
Yeah.
castle got built up, and you got to have the castle on one side's cool, but sometimes the royalty wants like a little, not like a summer castle, but like an away from the main city place. So they built a castle on the top of the other mountain,
Right.
and that's their like little secondary summer home or guest castle, and people can just be ferried across back and forth on these little hot air balloon platforms uh, to do whatever business they have. And yeah, I like that idea for this particular area. And now I got to figure out like how the world, like what did this, and what does that mean. But this is a
You
cute
could
little space that parties can visit, have an interesting interaction with, and move on without really
you
learning
could
much about it other than it looks
right.
cool.
You can also see on that on the far left of the picture there's also like a big chunk that look like may have also been taken out. So it could have been some kind of cataclysmic event
Yeah.
that just kind of annihilated certain parts. It's like straight up vaporized stuff as a whole.
But yeah,
I
so
mean,
this
there's
is
also a lot of water, so there could be some kind of cataclysmic water event that just eroded away the mountain. There's so many different things that I could come up with this thing, and there's even the smaller little. There's like the giant like spirally tower, and then there's one smaller one next to it,
mm-hmm.
like Tower Junior.
Right. What if those towers are growing? What if they're like a living like that? Because it has, unlike the
Oh,
rest of the
okay.
stuff that has very like stone edifice look to them, those kind of look more more biological. They have like that swirly tree kind of look to them, or at least more living. So maybe those are weird living structures that are growing over time.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. That is a very interesting one. I could see that happening, and I could also see with it looks like I mean it looks like the majority of the population was on the left side, and it could be that maybe they were kind of in the center, and then other people just stayed on that side, and then the rest just kind of survived and just kind of grew from there.
Mm-hmm.
Considering you don't get much of what's on the other side there, so it could be that where the most population is, from judging by like all the buildings and stuff, and judging by the boats and all that other stuff, would probably mean that it's more of a popular city to either visit or come see. So I could see players going into it and just going, "Whoa," as they're like heading towards it, and like them seeing it in like a new player's eyes, and they just go, "Oh my god, that's so cool looking."
Right. And the best part, if you're using art like this in your world building, especially in like if you're doing like a little DM dream board of sorts, is you can pocket this art for later, so that when you're describing it to your players, you could just show them this art so they have like an instant idea of what you're trying to convey, and they can kind of be wowed by it just like you. And it is a way to build a world, is just
It
to
is.
find some fun art. And like I said, just like ripples on a pond, just watch as those ripples kind of grow together, grow bigger and then clash against other ripples, and just kind of see what world kind of spins out from there. But anyway, I think we're reaching the end of our allotted time for the evening on this one.
Yeah, just
So,
about.
uh, any final world building thoughts you wanna share? Any bits
Um,
of wisdom that you've come across in your world building ways?
it is a lot harder than it seems. There is a lot to world building as a whole, no matter if it's in a storybook or a if you're even doing it for a character. Like it there's a lot more than what it is. Be prepared that you will bite off more than you can chew, but it is worth it, especially if you are making a world from scratch. It is a lot more than you can chew, but it is worth it because it is something that, and it's a lot of fun to learn. It's also a lot of fun where you can learn stuff from campaigns you've had go through that world, because you can also have it where players who have finished a campaign, they can go back into it and they can see the changes that have been done from previous campaigns. So that's another thing with world building that's a lot of fun, is you actually get to see your world change and grow and be different from what you started with. So it's a lot of stuff to like and take care of. It's kind of like a don't give up. Like it's a lot, but it's worth it.
So my suggestion. This is a philosophy that was given to me, by an English professor, during my college years, that has stuck with me ever since. Don't work harder than you have to. Um, do not, like, unless you have a vision and kind of know where you want to go. Feel free to start small. Don't create a whole world. Create a town.
That's more for world building.
Create a country. Uh, don't create a small region, but don't bite off the whole world. You don't need it. All at once, your players aren't going to get there yet. Also,
Oh, stubborn.
let your players do a good chunk of the work. Again, this is a time honored tradition that I enjoy using. Your players, they also have ideas. It's a collaborative game. Let them in, and let them influence your world building a little bit. It'll help.
Yeah. That one I do. That one I love doing. I love letting my players do things and letting them change things. I want them to change it. I want them
Um,
to help shape it.
also advice. While you can love your first world that you make, don't marry yourself to it. It is not. It is like many things. It will be your first try. Think of it as a rough draft. You will go back. You will edit it. You will change it. You will maybe decide to try something else completely different after
I
you get about halfway through it, and realize that maybe this world wasn't quite the vision you wanted it to
I
be.
I am exactly ready to do a whole nother world. I am exactly ready to do that. like I like this world that I've made, but I am absolutely ready to make another one. And definitely that first one is a rough draft, so I am willing to
Um,
do another one
but
eventually. When I
and
finish this storyline and stuff, I'll think of something
yeah, and
else.
also unless you are the kind of person who has like a true vision and the willingness to see it all the way through to the end, don't reinvent the wheel. There are DMs often and always borrow from other media, other stories, other arts, maps. People online make this stuff all the time. And if you have kind of like a concept in your head but don't really have a way to, formulate that into a cohesive idea, just spend some time browsing the internet and seeing what people with a more cohesive vision have put to paper, and see if anything there strikes your fancy, and if it does, borrow it, or make play around with it a little bit, make it your own, uh, or just kind of like stitch it whole cloth into your world if you like it well enough. Your players won't know or care, and even if they do know or care, that will be an interesting Easter egg for them to find, and you to be like, "Ha! You found the Easter egg."
Right. I've done that a lot with my first one. I have put in a lot of my own player characters that I have made, that I've played in different games throughout my years of playing D&D. I've kind of thrown them all into this game because I did it because since it is my first game, I wanted to have it where I had characters that I instantly knew the personality of, I instantly knew how to find them, I instantly knew what to do with them and how to make them work in it. So that way when I have things that are not my player characters that my players actually know, and throw them with things that are completely different, I am absolutely excited to do more things that are different. I'm excited to have my story done with so I can have something that's different that actually refines my world building and refines my actual D stuff. People apparently really like what I do. So I'm trying.
But yeah. Anyway, so I think with that, that is the best advice we can give you, for those of you who are taking notes on how to put a world together. I
Yeah,
hope,
especially if it's your first one.
yeah, especially if it's your first one. I hope we've given you enough to kind of work with, kind of showed you our processes a little bit, given you some ideas of how to kind of form and shape a world, for your players,
Yeah.
or just as a thought exercise for DMs who just want to make some worlds, because there are some
Yeah.
people who have a
I
lot of world ideas just kind of burning in them. They got
I
to get them out there.
I kind of focused on like a heavy story I wanted to do and then kind of built a world around it.
Hmm.
So I
It's
think
a
that's kind of
it's
what
a
I
narrative
actually did.
structure to work with. Yeah.
I did a huge narrative structure and built a world around that structure. So I'm hoping to the next one I do uh better than this first one. So
Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, that'll bring us to the end here of our seventh Tavern Talk, where again we talked about some world building and how to go about doing that. For those of you who are watching us later on YouTube, we have various other social media links as well that you can come visit us at our Twitters, or I guess that's what it's still whatever they call it these days. It's still
Something
around.
like
Visit
that.
us there. Your Instagrams, your TikToks, whatever else we do. We have a Discord. It is really cool, and you should come visit us. The link is in the belows. Visit us, hang out. If you want to chat some more world building or any of our other things, definitely do that. I know that we have some streams on YouTube that we have saved. We have various D&D adventures that we have done. We have a playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 that's going on right now. And
Yeah.
in the future, we have a few new campaigns that we are going to be launching shortly. But other than that, thank you for joining us this evening. And I will see you all, I guess, next month. We do this to remind you roughly the third Tuesday of the month. And for December, I think we're gonna have some special fun times. So we'll see what we roll out for our Christmas episode. So other than that,
Oh,
it
fun.
was fun hanging out with all of you. I think what are we calling them these days? Crittens? Yes, crittens.
Yes.
It's fun hanging out with all of the crittens, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.